You've tamed the voices in your head. You've put your courage to the test. Laid all your doubts.
Hi everyone, and welcome from your intuition queen to a new episode of Intuitive Queens Podcast. And today I have a surprise for you because I have a guest. Her name is Jolinda Johnson. She's a coach and a lot of other things, but she's not a new face for you because she was here in the first season of the podcast talking about her story and what was her niche at the time. But now she's expanded so much, and she's talking about something that is so important for all women to hear and to know and to learn more about. And that's why I wanted her to come back to the podcast so we can help you discover a little bit more, but also get more informed about this really, really important topic that I'm going to let Jolinda explain and talk about. Hi, Jolinda.
Hi, Mara.
Thank you for coming back.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, so I mentioned that you were on the podcast in 2020 and you were going through already at that time through an expansion of what was your niche, and you were going through more of I want women to feel the rebel side and more power, more unapologetic, and then you expanded even more. Tell us a little bit about this shift.
Yeah. Well, one thing is that I just listening to you explain that is I dropped gender from my business.
Yes.
Because I realized that I wanted to focus on perimenopause and burnout, and that just like periods don't have a gender, perimenopause doesn't have a gender. So that's a big shift for me because I also have realized that I began questioning a lot of gender stuff for myself.
Right.
And although I still identify as a woman, I really, I use the pronoun she, they, because as comfortable as I am in my body, there are a lot of things that, in terms of the societal gender roles, that I was conditioned to believe and identify as, woman versus man, that I just really don't identify with anymore, that I reject. Right. And that's interestingly enough, that's something that comes up a lot in perimenopause as well. This re-exploration of gender and sexuality. It's a lot more common than we realize to, be in heterosexual relationships all your life and then realize that actually you want to be in a same-sex relationship or a bisexual relationship for the first time. So yes, a lot of that stuff, I also came out as, identifying as queer, and I am bisexual. So that was a big thing. And
I can imagine. Yeah. I can feel like your emotions when you're talking about it, because I it's a big thing to say that to yourself.
Yeah. And but I also have made a big commitment to talking about those aspects of the perimenopause transition that don't get a lot of focus, because it's the people of color, LGBTQIA, and those under 45 who typically get left out of the conversation. And I'm really tired of the same voices, as grateful as I am that they are being vocal and bringing more awareness to the perimenopause transition. I don't think it's an accurate representation at all of, by 2025, there will be 1 billion of us going through the perimenopause transition. So it's not an accurate representation when we just see the same type of person over and over again. So yeah, that was a big shift for me. And also realizing that it's a time that not only One
Your
second.
dog agrees with what you're saying.
I have two dogs, yes. It's, not only this time of great hormonal changes, which I love to explore, and, how we can support ourselves through nutrition and movement and stress management. But it's also this time, as I mentioned before, of really looking at who you want to be at this point in your life and redefining the rules or just doing away with them altogether, and looking at things like self-compassion and boundaries and coming home to yourself in a way that feels just incredibly empowering, and like you are finally whole, all of the pieces that you've given away so that you could be everything to everybody. You finally get to call back and say, actually, this is who I am.
Yeah.
And I'm really proud of who I've become. And there's no reason why I have to buy into the narrative that now that I'm a certain age, I'm invisible, or, I need to shy away, or keep my head, or whatever, all these things that we're told. And then
I
it's
love that
actually
you say this, because I think what you just said, it's so powerful, because like when you said you become whole, because I think this is the age where you really understand yourself to a level that is so deep and that you could never get to before. And at the same time, it's when you can actually have a kind of like a 360 view of everything, including yourself, and then be like, okay, this is me. This is who I am. This is what I want. This is what I don't want. And you start to be like, I won't compromise, and I will do everything that it takes to be me and stay in my power.
Yeah.
And I think this is beautiful. And I love that you are talking a lot about this period of life, because what I hear, even from friends of my age, I'm 39, going 40 this year. And when I learned so much from you, like your posts and the things that you do. And sometimes I'm like saying things to my friends, and the narrative that I hear is like, oh no, but I'm not gonna get to menopause just now. So I'm like, no, but wait, you need to learn things before. And they're like, no, it's kind of like, don't even talk to me about that, because it's such a bad topic to talk about, that it's not yet the time.
Yep.
And I love how you are reshaping everything and letting people understand, women understand, this is a part of our process. We have to go through it.
Yeah.
We can decide to shy away from it until the very end that we can't, or we can get ready, prepare ourselves, and love ourselves in the process.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I did an interview yesterday as a guest expert for a group program, and the leader said, we have some women in the group who are pre-perimenopausal. And I said, do you have anyone under 35? And she said, well, no. And I said, so even if you don't identify as being perimenopausal, after 35, changes are occurring. And one of my friends who's a naturopath in New Zealand says that it's right around 37 that she sees things start to shift. And what isn't given a lot of attention is the mood changes. The mood changes happen even years before the menstrual cycle changes. And a lot of the symptoms that people talk about, like the hot flushes and the night sweats, vaginal dryness, those really don't happen until very late in the process, when estrogen is consistently declining and you are right around your final period. But before that, there are years where things are underway, and you'll notice those effects. And it's important to be aware of how you can support your body throughout all of the phases, and not just when you get to a point of crisis. And to be informed as to what all of the options are, so that you can advocate for yourself effectively if you do need to seek medical treatment, or if you do decide to pursue hormone replacement therapy, that you go in with your eyes wide open and make the best choice for you, as opposed to just saying, well, what do I do about this? You tell me. Because I feel like we always have to, no matter what route we choose, we always have to be our own best advocates.
I agree.
And it's so much easier to make choices when we are coming from a place of clarity and calm, as opposed to panic.
Oh, completely.
So
shall we talk a little bit about what exactly is the perimenopause and the menopause and how they affect us? And I don't know if there is a statistical age or just around that period of time, just so that whoever doesn't know can understand and figure out if maybe they are in that process, or if they are about to, or just at the end, and kind of understand where they're at and what they can look for.
So after 35, the thing that starts changing is progesterone. Progesterone starts declining, and it's more likely that we're not ovulating as consistently. And you might not notice anything radical, but a lot of people will they'll see that their mood right before their period is a lot more intense, more anxiety, more irritability. If physical symptoms have been an issue for you in the past, you might notice an increase in those. So more breast tenderness, more bloating, more cramps. And that's because estrogen is not going, it's not being opposed by progesterone as it should be. And you might also notice heavier periods as well.
Right.
Another telltale sign is when your cycle becomes consistently shorter. So you could have a 30-day cycle, for example, and then all of a sudden it jumps to 28 days, and it's 28 days for a couple of years. And that's also a sign that things are changing. But again, not necessarily anything you have to do anything about. It's just your body kind of letting you know. But then once estrogen starts fluctuating, and this is usually after 40, or right around 40, that's when estrogen starts having really a lot higher peaks and a lot lower valleys. And so if you looked at it on a graph, it would be up and down and up and down, and really trying to get the last of the eggs to fertilize. And so or not fertilize, sorry, to ovulate. And that's when you see a variation in your cycle by more than 7 days. So if you had the 28-day cycle, as I mentioned before, it could all of a sudden be 19 days.
Wow.
And then 35. And then 21, and just like what's going on, that's a part of perimenopause that a lot of people don't talk about. When estrogen is surging and your cycles become incredibly short, out of the blue and unpredictable, and especially for those who are used to having a really consistent cycle and planning the seasons and planning their calendar around their energy levels. And so it's like, I have a big event and I'm not supposed to have my period, but here it is. Because it's coming on day 19 and not day 28. So that could throw a lot of people off. And then eventually, so that's also where you will typically see heavier periods, more symptoms of PMS if that's what you've had in the past.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's a really good idea when you still are in your 30s to get a handle on your PMS, because whatever symptoms you have in your 30s, they're going to ramp up in your 40s. Most symptoms of PMS are a result of low progesterone, inflammation,
Mm-hmm.
and excess estrogen. And so those are things that you can all, you can do, you can do things about before your 40s. So you can be proactive and change your experience. Then eventually estrogen starts declining steadily, and your cycle will become 60 days apart or more.
Right.
So that's when you might go several months without a period, and then it will come back. And when it does come back, you'll notice that you have a lighter period. So it's kind of a strange transition to go from having some, depending on what your periods are normally like. Some people have really heavy periods in that middle phase. If you have fibroids aren't, because they are estrogen dependent. The more estrogen you have, the more they grow. That can be really problematic in that middle phase of perimenopause. Ovarian cysts, if you have a history of ovarian cysts, another thing to be aware of in that middle phase when estrogen is surging. But eventually it goes down, and you'll have periods that are further and further apart, lighter flow, which all sounds great, but as a trade-off, estrogen is a lubricant in your entire body. And so that's when you start to see vaginal dryness, dry eyes, itchy skin, itchy ears. Sometimes some people get a persistent cough.
Oh, wow.
Stress incontinence. That's where you're laughing or sneezing, and all of a sudden you pee your pants, because the bladder is covered in estrogen receptors. So when estrogen goes down, depending on the strength of our pelvic floor as well, that's why it's really important to take care of your pelvic floor before perimenopause, because the stronger it is, the less of an impact these things are going to have. And then eventually you'll go a year, 12 months with no period. And that is menopause. So menopause is the day of your last period, but you won't know that you have that menopause has occurred until you can count 12 months from that day.
Right.
So, and it's interesting because I've had clients who have said, well, I think I actually recently had a client who said, I went to the doctor and she said that I'm most likely in menopause. And I said, why is that? She said, well, I told her that I've gone 4 months with no period. And she said, well, that's probably it. And I was interesting. Did she do any blood work? Because one thing that can help you to predict if you are in menopause is your FSH level. And she said, no, she just thought that okay, it's 12 months, because it can come back after 8 months. I've seen it come back after 9 months. What you do have to be aware of, though, is if it comes back after 2 years, for example, that's not normal. It's not necessarily cause for alarm, but it needs to be investigated.
Right.
Because normally it's not your period coming back. It could be inflammation in the uterine lining. It could be a cyst. And in very rare cases, it can also be endometrial cancer. So, it's the 12 months, and then you can say you're postmenopausal, and that is typically, so the average age for that is 51. But that can happen as early as 40 and still be considered menopause, as opposed to primary ovarian insufficiency, which is something else. Between 40 and 45, it's considered early menopause.
Right.
And after 45, it's considered normal. So
Standard,
45 to 55 is considered the normal range for menopause, for your final period. So if you're thinking like all of these things that I'm describing, each phase is underway for years at a time.
Yeah.
It's like it's really a 7 to 10 year period of transition. For some, it's even much as 12, because we can still have things going on after our final period, that show up for us. But if you think of it as a 7 to 10 year period, and that 45 is considered normal, then why is it that when we're, going back to your example at 39, well, I don't need to know about that.
Yeah.
Because if you do the math, actually, that's a great time to start learning about it.
Yeah.
Because you can still do something about it.
Yeah.
You can still
Absolutely. But also because the impact of everything in your body, in your mind, everything, it's so big. It's not like something small that you're like, okay, well, this stopped happening to me, but yeah, I just have to get on with it and get used to it, and it's fine. Yeah, maybe I need to adjust for a little while, but then it's going to be fine. No, because the impact of that, it's so strong on different levels, obviously depending on the person, that it's so important to understand. And like you were talking about, this feeling or this understanding, you might want to date women and you never done it before, or mental clarity. I mean, those are not things that can be just taken as a thing, for granted. They are.
Well, there's a lot of mental health stuff that comes up that's not talked about enough. I talk about it as much as I can, because that's one of the things that's really come up for me. But it's something that catches a lot of people off guard.
Well, when I saw your post, I sent it to a client of mine, because I literally just had a client that was happy and shocked at the same time, because she was like, oh my God, I fell in love with a woman, but oh my God, what's wrong with me? And we went through unpacking all of the things. And obviously her problem was, how am I going to tell my parents about it? Because, the very strict religious family, I've always been a good girl, and now this. And I was like, okay, let's wait a second and let's unpack other stuff. And when I saw your post about it, I'm like, okay, well, she's right there. That's her, that's the age. And whatever, maybe she just had to meet this person and fall in love with her, and that's fine. But maybe there is something related to it. So if this is a thing, well, let's talk about it more, because at least you don't think you're crazy. You don't think that there is something wrong with you, but it's just a natural process of your body and everything that is changing and shifting within you.
Yeah. And I think a lot of things that we have, for whatever reason, not experienced either by choice or by circumstance in the past, or anything that we have repressed or just haven't been able to really explore in the depth that it needed to be explored, comes up.
Right.
It's energetically, it's a time of life where everything comes to the surface. And we talk, I know the science behind why we cry more, why hot flushes occur, but from an energetic perspective, I really do think it has to do with your body, as it's going through this transformation. It's like everything that has not been processed up to this point is revealed.
Right.
It comes up, and you have the choice to either push it down further or to work with it and let it out.
Yeah.
And release it. And I think if you're willing to do that work, then you become one of those people that we think of who has postmenopausal zest.
Right.
Because it's, I mean, we all know those beautiful human beings with postmenopausal zest. They are fully showing up as their authentic selves. No apology whatsoever. It's like, this is what works for me. If it doesn't work for you,
then bye. Yeah. I love that. No, and I think, it's so important because from my experience, even just, seeing my family, my mother, the way the women in my family behaved on the topic, it's like, okay, well, your life now, it's over. There is nothing else you can do. You're no longer a woman. You're just a piece of something that has to stay there. And I'm like, okay, no, because I can see there are a lot of other people that keep doing things up until they're 90, and I want to be like that. Yeah. But knowing what your body's going through and how you can manage yourself in this transition is extremely important, because otherwise you're always going to be way too tired or not knowing exactly what's happening. And as you said earlier, a lot of people plan around their energy level, and then all of a sudden all of this is going out of the window, and you kind of not know who you are, and how you can actually manage yourself in your life. So I think this is extremely important. As you said at the beginning, you need to realize what kind of person you want to be. Which is, I think it's a step that we always have to have, but not necessarily if you want to change job, or you want to enter or exit a relationship, or change country. Not just for that, like, this is within us, so we have to learn this.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really is a time to have compassion, incredible compassion for yourself, and be very aware that it is a phase. So to not latch on too tightly to the way that you're feeling as this is how it's always going to be. Not to over-identify with certain symptoms. Because things do eventually settle down, because it can, if you've never experienced radical physical changes before, it really can feel like a betrayal.
Right.
Because all of a sudden things are happening that are way beyond your control. And interestingly, a lot of us, when our bodies are not performing the way that we would like, rather than extend kindness and compassion to our bodies, we try to outdo them or punish them, or how can I overcome this by doing exactly what my body is not asking me to do. It's asking me to rest and slow down. I do not want to slow down, so how can I show my body that we actually can do more? So that's another thing to really look at in your late 30s, early 40s. What is your relationship with rest, and your relationship with boundaries, and your relationship with self-compassion, and knowing when enough is enough, and delegating and surrender, and all of these things that if you have an awareness of them already, then you don't have to, it's not a big crisis, because you just fall back on the things that you've already been doing. The foundation is there.
I agree. And I think that, I think for us, it's easier to be in the surrender mode, although it took me ages to get to the point and really, really, really listen to my body and stay in my energy. But when you get that, you see the changes in your life, and you see that everything actually comes easier if you slow down and surrender rather than keep pushing. But I do understand that when you go through such a big change within yourself, then also having this thing of having to surrender or rest might be confusing, and also you get frustrated and angry because you really feel like, what the hell is going on with me now? I'm not functioning anymore. How am I gonna go on, and what am I gonna do? And I feel the panic that people might have because you just don't work in the same way.
Yeah. And the fatigue is real. There will be days where, because your body is really undergoing a major change, there are days when, just like when you were a teenager, it's the second puberty. It's called the second puberty for a reason, because it really is the same process in reverse, and if you remember when you were a teenager, having days where you were just so tired, or just moody, like for no reason, like everything was just aggravating.
Yes.
Same thing is going to happen. There will be days where it's just like, why is everything bothering me so much? Stop chewing so loudly. Turn down the music. You'll be like hypersensitive to your surroundings. And a lot of that has to do with progesterone not being at optimal levels, because progesterone in the brain really acts like a sedative. And so when we're not producing progesterone at optimal levels anymore, because we're no longer ovulating consistently, it can feel like everything is just a little too much. And that's another reason why we often need a lot more space. Estradiol, the form of estrogen that's predominant in our reproductive years, is really a hormone, associated with giving and being available and looking out. And that's why in that first half of the menstrual cycle, that when we talk about the seasons, when estrogen is at its peak, it's spring and summer, and the archetypes are the maiden and the mother. How can I be out and about? How can I be available? What can I get for you? What can I give you?
Right.
And that starts going down in perimenopause. And all of a sudden it's, how can I be here for myself? What do I need to do for me? Why do you need more of my time? I need to start reclaiming that. And we have to allow that to be okay. It's not a time for you to expect to be available in the same ways that you always have been.
Right.
You expect to be available in the same ways that you always have been. Either you will overextend yourself and reach a point of exhaustion much faster, because your resources are going to be lower. Your reserves are going to be lower, or you're going to just feel incredibly guilty unnecessarily, unearned guilt.
This is very interesting, because
I
think for us women, guilt, it's something that we all have. It's kind of part of us, and knowing that if we don't follow our body and we learn to actually release some of the I have to do things for everyone, the guilt will come back. It's important, because I think so many women will feel this way.
Well, I mean, when we talk about boundaries, it's so important to have boundaries with other people and the relationships that you care about. But we also have to talk about the boundaries that we establish with ourselves. And I had a situation just last weekend, which was incredibly difficult for me, because I had to say no to something that I really wanted to do. But I knew I did not have the capacity for.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm a single mom. I've been divorced for almost 5 years. And last week, my son's class was quarantined because they had 7 positive COVID cases. He was not one of them. But, last week he was home and I had to rearrange everything to spend time with him and continue running my business and taking care of my clients. And it was quite a lot.
Yeah.
All possible, but quite a lot. And his father said, do you want me to take him this weekend? And my heart was saying, no, he can stay here. That's fine. He loves being with me. He loves being home. He doesn't need to go with you. And my head said, are you sure about that? Because yes, he prefers to be with me, but he also likes being with his dad. It's not a crisis for him to go with his dad. And it would give me, almost 2 days to just recharge.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that's the best decision, because if I don't have that space, then I'm just going to go into next week completely overextended. And we really have to look at what am I taking on simply to prove myself, simply to prove that I can still do something, as opposed to what is in the best interest for my body and my mental health. And that can be a real negotiation at times.
Yeah. And I think it's, again, as you said also at the beginning, saying that receiving energy, now you had your ex-husband wanting to help.
Yeah.
And there you were kind of like, well, no, I don't need any help. I'm fine.
Yeah.
But the reality is that the help was much appreciated.
Yeah.
And I think we all struggle with that normally.
Yeah.
In those moments, we really have to be more mindful of our body and ourselves and really do what's best for us in order to be more helpful after. Otherwise, as you said, you burn out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, Jolinda, there is so much we could talk about here, but we've been talking for about almost an hour. What I wanted to ask you is, what can women do in order to learn more about themselves, and what would be the next step if they figure out they are either in perimenopause or menopause?
Well, I always advocate for learning about the basics of perimenopause. Actually, on my website, I have a free 5-part video series that goes over the phases, how to support yourself with nutrition, lifestyle choices, mindset shifts, but to become informed earlier than you think you need to be, so that you can start, because consistency is key. Consistency and sustainable choices. And so really getting to know how to support your hormones early on is key. How do you eat to maintain blood sugar balance, for example? Because that's something that during perimenopause we become more resistant to insulin. And so if you are someone who has no idea how to eat to balance blood sugar, that would be a great place to start. One of the best things that you can do is think every meal and snack, I need protein, fat, and fiber. So if you're someone who's used to having a piece of toast and a cup of coffee, then that's probably not going to serve you too well when you get into your 40s.
Right.
You're going to want to think of, how can I, if I'm already experiencing sleep issues independent of night sweats, because that's something that often gets disrupted in the early and middle years of perimenopause is sleep. All of a sudden you are having a hard time falling asleep, or you're waking up between 2 and 4 in the morning. So that's something to get a handle on, so that you are, you have that foundation of a good night's rest. Practicing sleep hygiene, getting up and going to bed at the same time every day, having a nighttime routine that you look forward to, making peace with movement. When we are in perimenopause, we take longer to recover and are more prone to injury. So it's not a time to be doing extreme, CrossFit 5 times a week. But it's a great time for strength training.
Right.
If you're not strength training already, optimally 3 times a week. High intensity interval training as well is great for perimenopause. But if that's not your thing, then focus on the strength training and then add in something that you enjoy.
Right.
It's really important that you find some way to engage in weight resistant workouts. So if that's your own body weight, yoga, counts as well, depending on the style of yoga. But if you can maintain lean muscle mass, because it starts going down, especially after 40 at a more rapid rate, if you can maintain and build new muscle mass, then that will also offset the changes in estrogen. It will also support your mood. It will also support your bones, because after 30, we get to peak bone mass. And then if we're not doing anything to support our bones, then we're consistently losing it. And in perimenopause, because of the hormone shifts, we lose even more at a more rapid rate. Strength training is a great way to support your bones.
Right.
So that's something that I, just to start early and make it part of your routine, and not something that's like, I'm doing this for a month so that I can drop 10 pounds. Take weight out of it. I always advocate for, there are a few things that I do not know about myself. I don't know how much I weigh.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many calories I eat.
Same here.
I know what size I am now,
Mm-hmm.
simply because I've fallen in love with online shopping since the pandemic. So I do know what size I am, but I still come back to my size is whatever looks good on my body.
Yeah.
That's my size.
Yeah.
Because the more we obsess over these random numbers and deprive ourselves and override our body signals, this is really a time where you have to respect your body's needs. And interestingly enough, I was having a conversation yesterday. It's actually an IG live that I did with the naturopathic doctor that I mentioned earlier. And she said, your need for glucose actually goes up during perimenopause. Now, how interesting is that? Because the diet culture and their machine is telling us to go keto and to avoid all carbs during perimenopause.
Right.
So the more you can avoid those extreme diets, and just really tune into your body's signals, the better. And then, if you suspect that you are in perimenopause, it's also important to recognize that there's no test that you can go to the doctor and have them test your FSH levels. But what's most important are your symptoms. Right. So there's something called the menopause rating scale that you can actually download online, and that gives you an idea of some of the symptoms that might be showing up for you, and helps you to rate their severity, so that when you go to talk to your doctor, you can say this, for example, vaginal dryness has become a real issue. Hot flushes, not so much, like insomnia. I haven't been able to sleep in months. Things that I honestly, when I was younger, I thought that menopause was just hot flushes, and it's so much more than hot flushes.
Same here.
I thought it was, you had
that's what I saw my mom going through. So I was like, okay, well, that's what happens when you start to get menopause. Okay, not a big deal, I guess.
Yeah. Regular periods, and then hot flushes, and then you're old. That's I mean, that's that was my concept of it. And that's not the case. That's not the case at all. And even when I say that word old, I hate that word now, because I think that is a derogatory word. It's used against us, especially as, those of us who have been socialized as women. It's used as this weapon against us, as don't be that, when it's such a privilege to age.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to continue to be here in this one and only life. So, but those are, going back to your original question, having an awareness of your hormones and how to best support them through diet and lifestyle, making peace with movement, becoming, balancing your blood sugar and making consistent food choices, avoiding the extreme diets that cut out entire food groups, protecting your sleep, and then, on the emotional side, looking at your boundaries, being kind to yourself, having an empowered view of aging and connecting to your purpose, also important during this time, and then connecting with other folks who are going through the same, so you can realize, wow, I'm not alone in that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you said about listening to your body is so important, because our body always gives us clue. And it could be a very simple thing. You were talking about food and how we need more fiber, and I was thinking about myself, because since I moved back to Italy, at some point I just couldn't have breakfast like I used to, and I started to have cereals in the morning. And I was like, well, this is not the usual way, but I feel good with that. And now I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I don't know, and just my body is telling me slowly, hey, start to do some changes in your life, because you need to get ready. And I'm someone that really listens to my body, so I do what I feel I need to do without really much question, but there is always a connection. So I think that this is super powerful. And then everything that you said, it's so important.
Our body really knows. Our body really knows, and the more that we can strengthen the mind-body connection in all phases of our life, the better.
Totally. Okay, tell us where we can find you if we want to work with you, if we want to check you out and learn more about perimenopause or menopause, and just follow you.
So I have what I mentioned before, that free 5-part series on my website, jolindajohnson.com, which is a great place to start. I am on Instagram at Coach Jolinda. I have an upcoming group coaching program called Fire Up, which I'm not sure when this is going to air, but
tomorrow.
It's going
2 days. In 2 days.
Oh, all right. Well, yes, I have.
So you have the time to.
I have an upcoming group for coaching program starting in the middle of February, and so the wait list is open for that on my IG account, and that is all about support. We focus on 6 main hormones and how to support them through nutrition, lifestyle, and mindset. Because I, as a holistic health coach, a life coach, and a priestess, I really do believe in a holistic approach, mind, body, spirit,
Yeah.
and bringing everything into balance. So that's exciting. And then, I am always happy to take questions, connect. The best place to do that is really through Instagram. And, anyone who's listening, if you ever would like to send me a DM, my DMs are always open. And I'm just so appreciative of Mara and the podcast that she's created, and the willingness that she has to engage in these conversations and to talk about something which, for whatever reason, is still taboo, but literally affects millions of people.
Well, I want to say, go follow Jolinda on Instagram, because I learned so much from you on just following you. Sometimes I'm like, oh my god. So I think it's so informative and fun also. But yeah, and I learned so much from you, and learning from you all of those things, I was like, well, I have to share it with as many people as I can, because this topic is extremely important for us women. I mean, it's not something we can pretend it doesn't exist. And I am for learning to understand more of yourself, to connect to yourself more. So I had to have you again. And if you go through a bigger expansion in the next 6 months, I'm probably gonna have you again, because as you said, those topics are not talked about so much. And whenever there is someone that does such a big and beautiful work, has to be told around. And I hope people will share this episode with as many people as possible. We can all help each other, just doing something very simple, like sending the podcast episode to someone that might be in the age range, and just so that we all know what to do, how to do it, and that you can get in touch with Jolinda to get more information and really know more about it, because she's the expert on the topic.
Oh, thank you so much, Mara. I really appreciate you, and I'm glad we got to spend this time together today.
Yeah, thank you. Before we wrap up completely, is there anything you would like to say to the women listening today?
Be your own advocate. Be your own advocate, and know that the point of life is to keep showing up. The point is not to go through everything with no help and no support. So whatever support you need to make the best of these years, welcome it.
Yes, I love it. Well, I think this is a beautiful way to close this episode. Jolinda, thank you so much for being again on my show. It's been a great pleasure to have you, and thank you for this conversation.
Thank you, Mara.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode with Jolinda. Please do check her out. Everything is in the show notes, and please do get informed. This is so important. If you know anybody going through perimenopause or menopause, do send them the episode and tell them to check her out. All right, if you want to work with me, you can always go to my website, theintuitionqueen.com. You can find me on Instagram, The Intuition Queen. Join my Facebook group, Discover Your True Colors, or send me an email. I thank you so much for watching, for listening, and please do subscribe, and I will see you next week.
Your future's at the door.